Okay. So I need to tell you something that's been on my mind lately. And honestly, I think it's one of those truths that people feel but rarely say out loud. There's something about Aries energy that just captivates people. And I'm not talking about casual interest or mild curiosity. I'm talking about this deep, almost magnetic pull that makes people from every other zodiac sign look at Aries and think, I wish I had that. Now, before you think this is just another astrology video praising one sign over others, stay with me here. Because what I've been noticing, both in my own observations and in conversations with people across all 12 signs, is that Aries possesses something genuinely rare. Something that transcends typical zodiac stereotypes and touches on fundamental human desires that we all share, regardless of when we were born. And here's what really gets my attention. This isn't about Aries being perfect. They're not. Every sign has its shadows, its challenges, its growth edges. But there's a specific quality to Aries energy that resonates so deeply with what people are craving right now, especially in 2026, that it's created this almost universal admiration. Does that resonate with you? Have you noticed how often people say they wish they had more Aries energy, even if they'd never want to actually be an Aries? I've been thinking about this a lot because I keep hearing the same pattern in different words. A Libra friend tells me she wishes she could just decide things without weighing every option for hours. A Cancer colleague admits he envies how Aries people can walk away from situations without looking back. A Capricorn I know confessed that she's exhausted by always having to have a plan, and she watches Aries natives leap into things with this enviable spontaneity. And it hit me. What people admire about Aries isn't just one trait. It's an entire approach to being alive. It's a way of moving through the world that feels increasingly rare and desperately needed. So let me break down exactly what makes Aries energy so magnetic, why it's captured the imagination of millions, and what we can all learn from the zodiac's first sign, whether we have Aries placements or not. The thing about Aries that nobody really talks about enough is this. They live in the present tense. And I don't mean that in some abstract, spiritual way. I mean it practically, viscerally, in how they make decisions and take action. Most people, and I include myself in this, carry around this invisible backpack full of past experiences, old wounds, previous failures, and learned caution. We approach new situations through the filter of everything that's happened before. We hesitate because we remember the time we got hurt. We hold back because we recall when things didn't work out. But Aries, they drop that backpack at the door. They walk into each moment like it's the first moment that's ever existed. And that's not naivety, though people often mistake it for that. It's actually a form of profound courage that most of us have lost somewhere along the way. Think about it. When was the last time you approached something completely new without your mind immediately pulling up a database of similar situations and their outcomes? When did you last make a decision based purely on what you wanted in that moment, without calculating risks or consulting your anxiety about what might go wrong? This is the first thing that makes Aries magnetic. They have this ability to begin fresh, over and over again, without the weight of accumulated caution slowing them down. And in a world where most people are paralyzed by overthinking, where analysis paralysis has become the default mode of operation, watching someone just act, just move, just start, it's intoxicating. It reminds us of a version of ourselves we might have lost, or maybe never fully accessed. I remember talking to an Aries woman a few months ago, and she was telling me about how she'd quit her job, ended a relationship, and moved to a new city all within the span of 6 weeks. And the way she described it wasn't dramatic or chaotic. She just said, those things weren't working anymore, so I changed them. No agonizing, no endless processing, no months of should I or shouldn't I. She saw what needed to shift, and she shifted it. And honestly, half the people listening to her story were horrified by the speed of it all. But the other half, you could see it in their eyes. They were thinking, I wish I could do that. Because here's the truth. Most of us know what needs to change in our lives. We know which relationships have run their course, which jobs are draining us, which habits are holding us back. But knowing and doing are separated by this vast canyon of fear, doubt, and what-if scenarios. Aries energy builds a bridge across that canyon in about 30 seconds. They don't deliberate endlessly because they trust something deeper than logic. They trust their instinct, their gut, their immediate dread of a situation. And more often than not, that instinct serves them well. Now, I can already hear some of you thinking, but isn't that reckless? Don't Aries people make impulsive decisions they regret? And sure, sometimes, but here's what I've noticed. Even when an Aries makes what others might call a mistake, they don't tend to spiral into regret the way other signs do. They don't spend months or years beating themselves up, replaying the decision, wondering what would have happened if they'd chosen differently. They learn what they needed to learn, adjust course, and keep moving. That resilience, that ability to fail forward without getting stuck in shame or self-recrimination, that's another layer of what makes them so admired. The second thing that draws people to Aries energy is their radical authenticity. And I use the word radical intentionally, because what Aries offers isn't the carefully curated authenticity that's become popular on social media. It's not the "I'm going to share my vulnerable moment but only after I've processed it and made it palatable" version. Aries authenticity is raw, immediate, and sometimes uncomfortable. They say what they think when they think it. They express what they feel as they feel it. There's no filter, no performance, no strategic calculation about how their honesty will be received. In a culture that's increasingly built on image management and personal branding, where everyone is constantly aware of how they're being perceived, Aries energy cuts through all of that like a knife through butter. They're not trying to be likable. They're not trying to be impressive. They're just being exactly who they are in that moment. And if you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. They're not going to contort themselves to fit your expectations. And here's why that's so magnetic. Most people are exhausted by the constant performance of daily life. We're tired of code switching, of managing impressions, of saying what we think people want to hear instead of what we actually think. We're worn out by the mental gymnastics required to navigate social situations without offending anyone or revealing too much or seeming too intense or not interesting enough. It's exhausting. So when you encounter someone who just opts out of that entire game, who shows up as themselves without apology or explanation, it's like a breath of fresh air in a room that's been sealed shut for too long. I've watched this play out in group settings so many times. There'll be a conversation where everyone is being polite, diplomatic, carefully neutral, and then an Aries will just say the thing everyone else is thinking but won't voice. And there's this moment of shocked silence, followed by this palpable release of tension. Because someone finally said what was true. They broke the spell of collective pretense. And even if people don't agree with what was said, there's this grudging respect for the courage it took to say it. This authenticity extends to how Aries handles conflict, which is another area where their approach is both admired and sometimes feared. Most signs will avoid confrontation, or they'll engage in it passive-aggressively, or they'll process their feelings privately before bringing them up weeks later. Aries, if something bothers them, you're going to know about it immediately. They don't stockpile grievances. They don't drop hints and hope you'll figure it out. They just address it directly, right there in the moment. And while this can feel intense, especially for more conflict-averse signs, there's something deeply healthy about it. Because when you know exactly where you stand with someone, when there's no hidden resentment building up beneath the surface, when issues get resolved in real time instead of festering, relationships actually become simpler, cleaner, more trustworthy. You might not always like what an Aries has to say, but you never have to wonder if they're being honest with you. That certainty, that reliability of their directness, it creates a foundation of trust that's actually quite rare. The third element of Aries magnetism is their relationship with fear. And this is where things get really interesting. Because it's not that Aries people don't experience fear. They do. They're human. They have the same survival instincts and self-preservation mechanisms as everyone else. But their relationship to fear is fundamentally different from most other signs. Where other people let fear stop them, Aries lets fear inform them and then acts anyway. I think this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of Aries energy. People assume they're fearless, that they just don't feel the anxiety or doubt that holds others back. But that's not accurate. What's actually happening is that Aries has this internal hierarchy where action ranks higher than safety, where movement ranks higher than certainty, where the cost of not trying feels worse than the risk of failing. So when they feel fear, and they do feel it, they don't interpret it as a stop sign. They interpret it as information. Oh, this matters. This is important. This is worth doing precisely because it scares me. This is why Aries are often the first to volunteer for things that make other people uncomfortable. The first to speak up in a meeting. The first to approach someone they're attracted to. The first to pitch a wild idea that might get shot down. They're not doing this because they're confident it will work out. They're doing it because they've decided that the regret of not trying would be worse than the embarrassment of failing. And that decision, that internal calculus, it's something most people never make. Most people choose the safety of inaction over the risk of action, and then they spend years wondering what might have been. But Aries doesn't wonder. They find out, and even when things don't work out, even when they fall flat on their face, they have the satisfaction of knowing they tried. They gave it a shot. They didn't let fear make their decisions for them, and there's a freedom in that, a lightness, that people who play it safe never quite access. Because playing it safe has its own cost. The cost of unlived life, of unexpressed potential, of dreams that stay dreams because you never took the first step. This courage, this willingness to act despite fear, it's like a magnet for other people's admiration and sometimes their projection. Because when you watch someone do the thing you're too afraid to do, it triggers something in you. Sometimes it's inspiration. Sometimes it's envy. Sometimes it's this uncomfortable recognition of your own self-imposed limitations. But whatever it triggers, it's powerful. It makes you pay attention. It makes you wonder if maybe you could be braver too. I've been observing something fascinating about how Aries energy manifests in leadership. And this is the fourth major element that draws people to them like moths to a flame. Aries doesn't lead by committee. They don't lead by consensus. They lead by example, by sheer force of will, and by this unshakable belief that the path forward exists even when no one else can see it yet. Most leadership models we're taught involve careful deliberation, stakeholder buy-in, risk assessment, contingency planning, and those things have their place, absolutely. But there's a different kind of leadership that Aries embodies. One that's becoming increasingly valuable in a world that's changing faster than our planning cycles can keep up with. It's the leadership of the pioneer, the trailblazer, the person who says follow me and starts walking before anyone has agreed to come along. I watched this play out in a startup environment last year. The company was stuck in analysis paralysis, endless meetings about which direction to take, everyone wanting more data, more certainty, more proof that whatever they chose would work. And then this Aries founder just made a decision. Not the perfect decision. Not the one everyone agreed on. Just a decision. And she started executing on it immediately. And you know what happened? Half the team was initially resistant. Thought she was being rash. Worried it was the wrong call. But within 2 weeks, because there was finally movement, because things were actually happening instead of being endlessly discussed, the energy shifted. People got on board not because they were convinced it was the right path, but because a path was finally being walked. That's Aries leadership. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having the courage to choose a direction and start moving, trusting that course corrections can happen along the way. And in a world where most people are paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong choice, where perfectionism masquerades as thoroughness, this willingness to just start, to just begin, to just take the first step even when the entire staircase isn't visible yet, it's revolutionary. This connects to something else I've noticed about Aries energy that people find irresistible. They have this ability to make other people feel brave. It's contagious. When you're around someone who's taking risks, who's being bold, who's refusing to let fear dictate their choices, something in you wakes up. You start thinking, maybe I could do that too. Maybe I don't have to play it so safe. Maybe the worst case scenario isn't actually that bad. I've experienced this personally. I have a friend with a strong Aries placement, and whenever I'm around her, I notice I make bolder choices. I speak up more. I take risks I wouldn't normally take. It's not that she's pushing me or encouraging me explicitly. It's just that her energy creates this field where courage feels more accessible. Where the gap between wanting to do something and actually doing it shrinks dramatically. And I've heard this from so many other people. They'll say things like, I don't know what it is, but when I'm with them, I feel like I can do anything. That's the Aries effect. The fifth element that makes Aries so magnetic is their relationship with time, and this is subtle but profound. Aries lives in what I call compressed time. They don't drag things out. They don't let situations linger in ambiguity. They don't tolerate the slow death of something that should have ended months ago. When something needs to happen, they make it happen now. When something needs to end, they end it now. There's this urgency to their energy that can feel intense. But it's also incredibly efficient. Think about how much of your life is spent in liminal spaces. Relationships that are kind of working but not really. Jobs you're sort of okay with but not passionate about. Friendships that have run their course but you keep maintaining out of habit. Projects you started but never finished. Conversations you need to have but keep postponing. Most people exist in this perpetual state of almost, of not quite, of someday. Aries doesn't do that. They bring things to resolution. They force clarity. They create endings and beginnings instead of letting everything blur into an endless middle. And while this can be uncomfortable, especially for signs that prefer to let things evolve naturally or fade gradually, there's something deeply satisfying about it. Because clarity, even painful clarity, is better than ambiguity. Knowing where you stand, even if where you stand is at an ending, is better than existing in perpetual uncertainty. Aries gives people that gift, sometimes whether they want it or not. They cut through the fog. They force the issue. They make you deal with what you've been avoiding. I remember a situation where an Aries colleague confronted a team dynamic that everyone else had been tiptoeing around for months. There was this unspoken tension. This elephant in the room that was affecting everyone's work but no one wanted to address because it might get messy. And she just called a meeting and said, "Okay, we're talking about this now." And it was uncomfortable. People got defensive. There were some heated moments. But by the end of that hour, the issue was resolved. The air was clear, and everyone could move forward. What could have dragged on for another 6 months, slowly poisoning the work environment, got handled in 60 minutes because someone had the courage to force the conversation. This brings me to the sixth aspect of Aries magnetism, and it's one that I think is particularly relevant right now in 2026. Aries energy is fundamentally optimistic, but not in a naive or Pollyanna-ish way. It's optimistic in the sense that they believe in possibility. They believe that things can change, that situations can improve, that new paths can be forged, and they believe this not because they're ignoring reality, but because they've seen themselves create change over and over again through sheer force of will. We're living in a time of profound uncertainty and anxiety, climate crisis, political instability, economic volatility, social fragmentation. It's easy to feel powerless, to feel like individual action doesn't matter, to slip into cynicism or despair. And in that context, Aries energy is like a lifeline. Because Aries doesn't wait for conditions to be perfect. They don't wait for permission. They don't wait for someone else to fix things. They just start. They take action. They create change in their immediate sphere of influence. And they trust that those ripples will spread. This is why you see so many Aries people as activists, entrepreneurs, innovators, disruptors. Not because they have some special gift or advantage, but because they have this fundamental belief that one person can make a difference. That action matters. That trying is always better than accepting the status quo. And in a world where so many people feel helpless, where learned helplessness has become almost epidemic, watching someone refuse to accept that helplessness, watching someone insist on their own agency, it's powerful. It reminds us that we're not as powerless as we sometimes feel. I've been thinking about this in relation to the climate movement. You see a lot of young Aries energy there. People who refuse to accept that the future is predetermined, who insist on taking action even when the odds seem overwhelming. And yes, some of their tactics are controversial. Yes, they sometimes alienate people with their intensity. But they're also moving the conversation forward. They're forcing issues that were being ignored. They're creating change through sheer refusal to accept the unacceptable. That's Aries energy at its most potent. The seventh element, and this one might surprise you, is that Aries energy is fundamentally generous, not in the traditional sense of generosity, not in the giving gifts or doing favors sense, but generous in how they share their fire. Aries doesn't hoard their enthusiasm. They don't gatekeep their passion. When they're excited about something, they want everyone to be excited about it. When they discover something valuable, they want to share it. There's this infectious quality to their energy that pulls people in and lifts them up. I've noticed this particularly in how Aries people champion others. When they believe in someone, they believe loudly. They're not subtle about their support. They'll introduce you to everyone they know. They'll talk you up in rooms you're not in. They'll push you to take opportunities you're not sure you're ready for. And sometimes this can feel like too much. Like they're not respecting your pace or your process. But more often, it's exactly what people need. Someone who believes in them more than they believe in themselves. Someone who sees their potential and refuses to let them play small. This generosity extends to how they handle competition. And this might seem counterintuitive because Aries is often described as competitive. And they are. They love to win. They love to be first. But here's what I've observed. Aries competes with themselves more than with others. They're trying to beat their own previous performance, to push their own limits, to see how far they can go. And when someone else succeeds, especially someone they respect, they're genuinely happy about it. They don't see other people's wins as taking something away from them. They see it as proof that winning is possible, that the game is worth playing. I watch this dynamic play out in a competitive industry where you'd expect cutthroat behavior. There was this Aries executive who was known for being fiercely ambitious, always going after the biggest deals, always pushing for more. But she was also known for mentoring younger colleagues, for celebrating other people's successes, for creating opportunities for others to shine. And when someone asked her about it, how she balanced being competitive with being supportive, she said something that stuck with me. She said, "There's enough success to go around. Someone else winning doesn't mean I lose. It means the bar just got raised, and now I get to rise to meet it." That mindset, that abundance mentality in the context of competition, it's rare. Most people operate from scarcity, from the belief that there's only so much success or recognition or opportunity to go around, so they need to guard their piece of it jealously. But Aries operates from abundance. They believe in expansion, in growth, in the possibility of everyone winning, and that generosity of spirit, that refusal to play small or make others play small. It's magnetic. The eighth aspect of Aries magnetism is their relationship with failure, and this is where their true strength reveals itself. Because Aries fails a lot. They fail more than most signs because they try more than most signs. They take more risks, make more attempts, put themselves out there more often. And each of those attempts carries the possibility of failure. But here's the thing. Aries doesn't catastrophize a failure. They don't let one setback define them. They don't spiral into shame or self-doubt. They just dust themselves off and try again. I think this is one of the most valuable lessons Aries energy offers. In a culture that's become increasingly risk-averse, where failure is seen as something to be avoided at all costs, where people's entire sense of self-worth gets tied up in their success or lack thereof, Aries shows us a different way. They show us that failure is just information. It's just feedback. It's just one data point in a much larger experiment called life. And the only real failure is not trying at all. I remember reading about an Aries entrepreneur who'd started and failed at 7 different businesses before finally building one that succeeded. And when someone asked him if he regretted all those failures, if he wished he'd been more careful, more strategic, he said no. He said each failure taught him something essential. Each one eliminated a path that didn't work, bringing him closer to the path that would. And more importantly, each failure proved to him that he could survive failure, that it wasn't the end of the world, that he could get back up and try again. That resilience, that proof of his own durability, was worth more than any success that came easily. This resilience isn't just about bouncing back from failure. It's about how Aries handles rejection, criticism, and setbacks of all kinds. They don't take things personally in the way other signs do. When someone says no to them, they don't hear "you're not good enough." They hear "not right now," or "not this way," or "not with this person." And then they move on to the next opportunity. They don't waste energy trying to convince people who aren't interested. They don't get stuck in loops of "why didn't they like me?" or "what did I do wrong?" They just accept the no and keep moving. This ability to not take rejection personally, to not let other people's opinions define their self-worth, it's incredibly freeing. And it's something most people struggle with deeply. We're so conditioned to seek external validation, to measure our worth by how others respond to us. That rejection feels like a fundamental statement about our value as human beings. But Aries doesn't buy into that. They know their worth isn't up for debate. They know that someone else's no doesn't diminish them. And that certainty, that unshakable sense of self, it's magnetic because it's so rare. The 9th element that makes Aries so universally admired is something I've been observing more and more lately. And it's their relationship with joy. Not happiness in the sense of a sustained emotional state, but joy in the sense of those sharp, bright moments of pure alevins. Aries has this capacity to find joy in the most unexpected places, to extract pleasure from challenges, to turn obstacles into games. They don't wait for life to be perfect to enjoy it. They don't postpone their happiness until conditions are ideal. They find reasons to celebrate right now, in the middle of the mess, in the midst of the struggle. I think this is particularly powerful in contrast to how most people approach life. We've been conditioned to believe that joy is something we earn after we've checked all the boxes, after we've achieved our goals, after we've solved our problems. We tell ourselves we'll be happy when we get the promotion, when we find the relationship, when we lose the weight, when we have more money, when things finally calm down. But that when never comes because there's always another goal, another problem, another reason to postpone our joy. Aries doesn't play that game. They find joy in the pursuit itself. They celebrate small wins. They laugh in the middle of chaos. They turn mundane tasks into adventures. I watched an Aries friend turn a frustrating car break down into an impromptu picnic on the side of the road, complete with music from her phone and snacks from a nearby gas station. What could have been a miserable experience became a memory she still talks about with genuine fondness. That ability to alchemize difficulty into delight, to refuse to let circumstances dictate their emotional state. It's a superpower that most people never develop. This connects to something deeper about Aries energy that I think is at the core of why people are so drawn to them. They're fully embodied. They're not living in their heads, endlessly analyzing and planning and worrying. They're in their bodies, in the moment, experiencing life directly rather than thinking about experiencing life. And in a world where most people are dissociated, where we're constantly distracted by screens and thoughts and anxieties about the future or regrets about the past, someone who's actually present, actually here, actually alive in their body and in the moment, it's magnetic in a way that's hard to articulate. I've noticed this particularly in how Aries people move through physical space. There's a confidence to their movement, a certainty, an ownership of their body that's rare. They don't apologize for taking up space. They don't make themselves small. They walk into rooms like they belong there, not because they're arrogant, but because they're not questioning their right to exist in that space. And that physical confidence, that embodied presence, it affects everyone around them. It gives other people permission to inhabit their own bodies more fully, to take up space without apology, to be present rather than performing presence. The 10th aspect, and this is one that I think is often overlooked, is that Aries energy is fundamentally honest about desire. They want what they want, and they're not ashamed of it. They don't dress up their desires in acceptable language. They don't pretend they want something for noble reasons when really they just want it because they want it. And in a culture that's deeply conflicted about desire, where we're supposed to want the right things for the right reasons, where ambition is suspect and pleasure is indulgent and wanting too much makes you greedy, this straightforward relationship with desire is refreshing. Most people have been taught to be suspicious of their own wants. We've learned to question our desires, to wonder if they're valid, to feel guilty for wanting more or different or better. We've internalized so many messages about what we should want versus what we actually want that we've lost touch with our genuine desires. We don't even know what we want anymore because we've spent so long trying to want the right things. But Aries knows what they want, and they pursue it without apology. They don't need to justify their desires to anyone, including themselves. If they want something, that's reason enough to go after it. And this clarity, this directness, it cuts through so much of the confusion and self-doubt that plagues most people. When you're around someone who knows what they want and isn't afraid to pursue it, it gives you permission to get clear on your own desires, to stop pretending you want what you think you should want and start acknowledging what you actually want. I had a conversation with an Aries woman who'd just left a prestigious career to become a surf instructor, and when I asked her how she made that decision, she said something that stuck with me. She said, "I stopped asking myself what made sense and started asking myself what I wanted, and the answer was immediate and clear. I wanted to be near the ocean. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to teach people something that brought them joy. So I did it. And when I pointed out that she'd given up a lot of money and status and security, she just shrugged and said, 'Yeah, but I didn't want those things as much as I wanted this.' That simplicity, that clarity, that refusal to complicate desire with should s and what ifs and but what will people think, it's liberating to witness. Because most of us are drowning in complexity, in competing priorities, in the endless negotiation between what we want and what we think we should want. And here's someone who just cuts through all of that and says, 'This is what I want, so this is what I'm doing.' It makes you realize how much energy you've been wasting on internal debates that don't actually need to happen. The 11th element is Aries' relationship with anger. And this is where things get really interesting because anger is probably the most stigmatized emotion in our culture. We're taught from childhood that anger is bad, that it's destructive, that good people don't get angry or at least don't show it. We're supposed to be calm, rational, measured at all times. And the result is that most people are walking around with years of accumulated, unexpressed anger that's eating them alive from the inside. Aries doesn't do that. When they're angry, they express it, immediately, directly, and then it's over. They don't hold grudges. They don't let resentment build up. They don't passive-aggressively punish people for weeks over something that bothered them. They just say, "Hate. That pissed me off. Here's why," and then they move on. And while this can be intense in the moment, while it can feel confrontational or aggressive to people who aren't used to direct emotional expression, it's actually incredibly healthy. Because anger is information. It tells you when a boundary has been crossed, when something isn't right, when you need to protect yourself or stand up for yourself or change something, and when you express anger cleanly and directly, when you use it as the signal it's meant to be rather than suppressing it or letting it fester. It serves its purpose and then dissipates. But when you suppress anger, when you tell yourself you shouldn't feel it or you're not allowed to express it, it doesn't go away. It goes underground. It becomes resentment, bitterness, passive aggression, chronic tension, health problems. I've watched Aries people have what looks like an explosive argument with someone, and then 5 minutes later they're laughing together like nothing happened. And people who aren't used to that kind of emotional directness find it baffling. How can you be so angry and then just be fine? But that's the point. The anger was expressed. The issue was addressed. And now it's done. There's no residue, no lingering tension, no unspoken resentment poisoning the relationship. This emotional honesty, this willingness to feel and express the full range of human emotions without shame or suppression, it's something most people desperately need but are terrified to access. We've been so conditioned to be nice, to be pleasant, to not make waves, that we've lost touch with our own emotional truth. We don't even know what we're really feeling half the time because we're so busy managing how we appear to others. But Aries doesn't manage their emotions for other people's comfort. They feel what they feel. They express it. And they trust that authentic relationships can handle that level of honesty. The 12th, and perhaps most profound aspect of Aries magnetism is their relationship with identity. Aries doesn't derive their sense of self from external sources. They're not defined by their job, their relationships, their achievements, or other people's opinions of them. They have this core sense of I am that exists independent of any role they play or any validation they receive. And in a world where most people's identity is cobbled together from external feedback, where we're constantly looking to others to tell us who we are and whether we're okay, this self-generated sense of identity is revolutionary. Think about how much of your self-concept comes from outside yourself. You're a good person because people tell you you're good. You're successful because you've achieved things that society defines as success. You're attractive because you receive attention and compliments. You're smart because you got good grades or have an impressive job. Your entire sense of who you are is built on a foundation of external validation, which means it's constantly at risk. What happens when you lose the job? When the relationship ends? When you fail at something? When people criticize you? Your entire identity can crumble because it was never really yours to begin with. But Aries has this unshakable core. They know who they are independent of circumstances or other people's opinions. And that knowing isn't based on arrogance or delusion. It's based on this fundamental trust in their own existence, their own validity, their own right to be exactly who they are. They don't need anyone's permission to be themselves. They don't need anyone's approval to pursue what matters to them. They don't need external validation to know they're okay. I remember talking to an Aries artist who'd been rejected by dozens of galleries, told repeatedly that his work wasn't commercial enough, wasn't what people wanted, wouldn't sell, and he just kept making it anyway. Not because he was stubborn or delusional about the market realities, but because making that art was who he was. It wasn't something he did to get validation or make money or impress people. It was an expression of his core self, and whether anyone else appreciated it or not was almost beside the point. He was going to make it because not making it would be a betrayal of who he fundamentally was. That level of self-possession, that immunity to external pressure to be someone other than who you are. It's rare and powerful, because most of us are constantly shapeshifted, constantly adjusting ourselves to fit what we think others want or expect, constantly betraying our own truth in small and large ways to gain approval or avoid rejection. And we don't even realize we're doing it because we've been doing it for so long that we've forgotten there's another way to be. This brings me to what I think is the ultimate reason why everyone wishes they were Aries, or at least wishes they had more Aries energy. It's not about any single trait or quality. It's about the fundamental freedom that Aries embodies. The freedom to be yourself without apology. The freedom to want what you want without justification. The freedom to act on your desires without waiting for permission. The freedom to fail without it destroying you. The freedom to succeed without it defining you. The freedom to feel your feelings without suppressing them. The freedom to change your mind without explaining yourself. The freedom to begin again as many times as necessary. That freedom, that radical self-permission, that refusal to be constrained by fear or doubt or other people's expectations. It's what we're all craving whether we realize it or not. We're exhausted by the constant self-monitoring, the endless internal negotiation, the perpetual performance of being acceptable. We're tired of playing small, of holding back, of waiting for the right time that never comes. We're worn out by our own caution, our own overthinking, our own fear of what might happen if we just let ourselves be fully, unapologetically alive. And when we encounter Aries energy, whether in an actual Aries person or in someone with strong Aries placements, or even just in moments when we access that energy within ourselves, we remember what it feels like to be free. We remember that we have agency, that we can choose, that we can act, that we can change things. We remember that life is happening now, not someday when conditions are perfect. We remember that we're allowed to want things and go after them. We remember that failure isn't fatal and success isn't everything. We remember that we're more resilient than we think, more capable than we believe, more powerful than we've been taught. This is why Aries has won countless fans across all the other signs. Not because they're perfect or because their way is the only way or because everyone should be more like them, but because they remind us of possibilities we've forgotten. They show us what it looks like to live with courage, to act with conviction, to move through the world with confidence and authenticity and joy. They demonstrate that it's possible to be fully yourself and not only survive but thrive. They prove that taking risks is worth it, that being honest is worth it, that showing up as you are is worth it. And maybe the most important thing Aries teaches us is this: you don't have to wait. You don't have to be ready. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to know how it's going to turn out. You just have to start. You just have to take the first step. You just have to trust that you'll figure it out as you go, that you're capable of handling whatever comes, that the path will reveal itself as you walk it. Because here's the truth that Aries knows in their bones: life is short, time is finite, opportunities don't wait around forever, and the cost of not trying, of not risking, of not showing up fully, that cost is higher than any failure could ever be. The real tragedy isn't falling short of your goals. It's never pursuing them in the first place. It's getting to the end of your life and realizing you spent it playing it safe, making yourself small, waiting for permission that was never going to come. So whether you're an Aries or not, whether you have Aries placements or not, you can access this energy. You can choose courage over comfort. You can choose action over analysis. You can choose authenticity over approval. You can choose to start before you're ready, to speak before you're certain, to move before you have all the answers. You can choose to be the protagonist of your own life instead of a supporting character in someone else's story. That's what Aries offers us. Not a personality to copy or a set of traits to acquire, but a reminder of what's possible when we stop holding ourselves back.